Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's Bimber PF, and on today's episode we're going to be checking out something that's from Bimber, but not from Bimber, but from Bimber. Here we have the Apogee XII pure malt whiskey, product of England, but we'll get into all of that in a moment. There's a little bit of kind of talking about this whiskey before we get into the actual tasting, but as always, if you're more interested in the tasting notes of this, then you can skip ahead to that. If you don't like the intro, there'll be some chapters below, so you can go and check that out. Now, before we get into this bad boy, it's important to say that these guys sent me this bottle over for review. It came up randomly in the post. They sent me an email saying they're sending me a sample of all things, and a bottle came through the post. So, yeah, it wasn't kind of it wasn't pre-warned. It just turned up one day, and I'll just review whatever comes my way with complete honesty, as you guys know. So today what we have here is Bimber's latest release, and we'll go into more details about the actual bottling before, but I want to talk about why this kind of exists first, if that makes sense to you guys. But you won't see Bimber up on the top here. You'll see it down the bottom. It says something about ex-Bimber casks. Again, we'll go into that in a little bit. But this is really available on kind of like the Bimber website and whatnot, even though they're kind of diversifying it out and making it a separate brand almost. A little bit like what you would see something like Audi used to be Volkswagen, that sort of thing. Now they've kind of split out. I guess that may be the aim with this. I don't know their future plans. In any case, this pretty much exists because they're really trying to kind of create a core bottling that is more available to people that are kind of like me and you, the average drinker. If you know Bimber at all, I've actually ever owned one bottle. I've managed to review a couple of them, but they are so hard to get hold of at the moment because they've got a kind of really good reputation, essentially. The liquid that they produce is astounding. There's no doubt about that. I've covered many in my time, and they've all been really good. They've all been within that bracket of good and excellent. There's been no poor ones, and so therefore they sell out really quickly. And in my opinion, for a high price. But it is what it is. They're selling out, so of course people disagree with that statement. People think it's well worth the money. I have to say, as an aside, I think most people are collecting. Most people's probably unfair to say, but there are a lot of people collecting their bottles rather than drinking them. So that said, this exists so that people who like to drink whiskey instead of collecting them have an option. There's going to be a lot of these bottles available. I don't know the exact figures, but it's in the thousands rather than the few hundred single cask vibes. Now, there's some key distinctions you need to make about this if you don't already know about. Yes, there's no secrets here. It's there's a few kind of inflections on the label which deflect from the kind of true meaning, I would say, but it's there's no hidden things here. You can find more information on the website. It's intentionally devoid of information on the labels here because it's kind of really kind of a clean, striking marketing box and whatnot. So you'll find some key information, but not all of it. One of the key ones here is the pure malt whiskey. So this essentially is a blended Scotch that's been finished in ex-bourbon English casks essentially. We don't know what these distilleries are. We do know that they're a mix of Highlands and Speyside whiskies, as you might have seen on other videos if you've watched a few of these. And I implore you to watch more than my video, of course, because, as I always say, just one person and not an expert in any stretch, so you should always diversify your opinions. I did attempt to ask what the distilleries were, just as a bit of kind of a cheeky aside, but, very, very, very few people know exactly what it is. Even people that work for Bimber don't know where this comes from, and I think that's kind of okay. I'm not bothered about that. And I should also preface this with a kind of statement about sourcing whiskies, because I don't care about that. There's no problem with that whatsoever. If you look at bourbons, there's a massive place called MGP, and they produce massive amounts of mash bills and bourbon and rye and wheat and all sorts of stuff, and you can go and buy from them, and you can label it as your own, and it happens in Scotland as well. There's kind of many brands that will do this. Even independent bottlers, can do their own blends. That's exactly how it exists. So I have no problem whatsoever with the sourcing of whiskies. That's an absolute statement. And that's exactly what this is. They've sourced however many different whiskies, single malts in this case. I'm not sure if it's just 2 distilleries, it could be more. All we know again is the Highlands and the Speyside. Minimum age of 12 years across that board. It's non-chill filtered, natural coloured, and then once they've received that, they've aged it for a short finishing period of time, don't know exactly how long, in ex-Bimber casks. Of course, we know that that's probably going to be ex-bourbon. I think across the board this is all ex-bourbon. There's no kind of sherry influence or peat influence. All ex-bourbon that's had some Bimber liquid in it, and has then been sort of tipped out, and then this has been thrown in there as well. I have to say, my initial opinion of that was like, kind of who cares? It seems like it's kind of the only way to get Bimber on the label, although I don't really mind that too much. But I do have to say, I did kind of a fair amount of research on this one, because I think it's important with something like this. And someone I trust quite keenly, a guy called Vlad at Whisky Malt Content, who's a smaller YouTube channel, you should check him out. He had the ability to try the liquid before it was added to the cask, and he says that it had quite a significant difference to it, and I trust that opinion. So that's now kind of my opinion, I guess. I haven't been able to try it, so I can't kind of true say that, but I trust Vlad. Go check his video out on this one here. He did it before it was kind of released, I guess, almost. He was lucky enough to do it quite early. Yeah, and he says that the influence is there. So yeah, to summarise that kind of fairly lengthy intro for a start, I don't usually go into that sort of information, but I think it is important in this situation. We've got a blended Scotch that's been finished in some English whiskey barrels and is sold sort of under the Bimber umbrella, but not really. Okay, enough wittering on then. Let's get into the actual whiskey itself and check out if it's any good. As I said earlier, natural coloured, non-chill filtered. I think it looks lovely. Whatever. Let's get into the nose and see what we got. Okay. It's, for me, it's almost like a classic-y Speyside-y nose to it, initially at least. Bags of those orchard fruits, those kind of apples, those pears. Nothing too out of the ordinary going on, for sure. Perfectly fine. Enjoyable. Let's get onto the palate. Okay, so there's a few different layers going on here. Initially, you get that kind of sweetness from those nose elements that we were getting, those kind of baked apples, pears, that sort of thing. There's a little bit of kind of honey and vanilla coming through. Then a kind of big, bold, peppery spiciness. And a big amount of charred oak as well. I'm not sure if that's coming from their barrels or the ones that's from previous. But yeah, some serious char coming through. Almost borderline smokiness, but really on the back end. It does dip off a little bit on the finish. It's the sweetness disappears quite early, I have to say, but it's fairly long on the spiciness. It's still going now for me. I'm gonna have another quick sip. Now I have to say, I'm not that well versed in Bimber stuff. I don't get involved in the FOMO. I'm not interested in secondary market. If I can get hold of it, I can. The ones I have tried, I've enthused about quite succinctly. I have the ex-peated behind me, so I can't even really do a comparison to other Bimbers to see if that kind of Bimber house style is really going on. I don't really get it from my kind of personal palate, but that's just me. I don't think it's trying hard to be a Bimber product. That's the key thing here. They've built this to help fund their new distillery, Dunfale, which is going to be a Scottish distillery, and of course they've done this to show that they can blend whiskey, that's not theirs, I guess. But yeah, okay, let's talk a little bit about the price on this thing as well, because I think that's really important in this situation, really. So the kind of cheapest I've found this for is just under 50 quid. House of Malt, they had it on a deal, so I don't know if it's going to be like that again, but go and check them out. Typically this is going for about £65. The Bimber website has it for 50, but it has tax added after. So with that and postage, it's looking more about that £65. Personal opinion here, I think that's probably a little bit too much for the tasting experience. That's what I review on. That's my MO. Yes, it's got a lovely bottle. Yes, it's helping fund their business further. But for my tasting experience, and it is just lovely, it's fine enough. I'm enjoying it, as you can see. I've absolutely no problem with the liquid whatsoever. could just do with being a bit less. I would rather, I think less than 50 quid before shipping would be a good sort of price point for me. So if you can get it for that less than 50 quid, I would say have at it. You know, this is a whiskey drinker's whiskey for the drinking. You know, this isn't for keeping, this isn't for saving. The name is a bit weird, apogee. You know, the scientific term for that is if you have an object in orbit around a planet, it's the point that's furthest away from that planet. So I don't know what they're trying to say with that. Like maybe they're sort of trying to say that this is as far away from Bimber as they're ever going to go, basically, before they come back round to doing more Bimber. Because it is a pretty outlandish thing to do. You know, again, you know, finishing in your own product, you know, it's fine. Why not? You know, they're experimenting. Besides the point. So yeah, like I said, bit of a longer video today because I think it's important to kind of have a discussion point, and I want to know what your opinions are of this in the description below, because I'm sure many of you have tried this. I've sort of said to them sort of privately, and I'll say it openly as well, I think my biggest gripe, if gripe is even the right word, is that Bimber liquid is so excellent, frequently so excellent, that for me this one's just a bit under my expectations, even though it's not a Bimber product. You know, it's not fair to put those expectations on it, but when I'm buying it as a Bimber product to support Bimber and whatnot. It's a really good tasting whiskey, probably a bit expensive, but not on a par with the normal Bimber whiskey drinking experience, in my opinion. And as I said earlier, I'm going to carry on enjoying it. It's lovely enough, it's certainly fine, and I enjoy it, and I think most people who have bought it will enjoy it as well.